A police dog was found protecting 3 kittens, but that wasn't the whole story. It started on a cold Sunday morning. A stray dog was spotted curled around something beneath an oak tree, his body motionless but his eyes wide open, watching. When the vet team approached, they expected to find another case of abandonment. What they found instead were 3 shivering kittens tucked beneath the chest of a German shepherd who hadn't eaten in days, but refused to leave them. He wouldn't move unless they were safe, wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep. Nobody knew his name, but the tag they found changed everything. This isn't just a story of survival. It's a story of grief, healing, and the kind of loyalty that lives long after orders end. A story where a retired canine, presumed dead, shows the world what it means to keep protecting, even when no one's watching. Stay with us. You'll never see a German shepherd the same way again. The wind in Wisconsin Rapids had a different texture in October. It wasn't cold in the way that chased people indoors, not yet. It was something gentler, a warning in a whisper, brushing through the amber leaves like someone turning pages in a forgotten story. Ellie Tron zipped up her jacket, tugged the sleeves past her wrists as she crossed the cracked sidewalk leading into Grandview Park, the familiar shortcut between Jefferson Elementary and her grandmother's house on Cherry Street. At 8 years old, Ellie walked alone with the kind of quiet independence that often surprised adults. There was no skipping, no chatter to herself, no dragging of her feet. She moved like someone who noticed things. The slight limp of the old squirrel near the fence line, the new dent in Mr. Halloran's mailbox, the way the clouds pressed lower than usual over the park's canopy of thinning trees. Her backpack was a bit too big for her shoulders, slumped slightly to the right. A purple clip-on keychain in the shape of a dog paw bounced with each step, the plastic dulled from being gripped too many times. She had named it Copper when she was 5, long before she could pronounce the word veterinarian, a word that now circled her life like breath. Her father, Dr. Thaddeus Tron, was the only veterinarian in town who spoke fluent Vietnamese and worked 7 days a week without complaint. His clinic, Tran Animal Care and Rescue, sat between an ice cream shop and a thrift store, and Ellie had spent more of her childhood among scales, fur, and IV bags than most grown-ups ever would. It had shaped her, not into a know-it-all, but into something softer, something watchful. She didn't flinch at blood. She didn't look away when animals were in pain. And more than anything, she had learned that silence, when shared gently, could sometimes comfort more than words ever could. Today, like every day, she took the long way home, through Grandview Park, past the broken swing set, across the clearing with the mural wall kids had painted with their hopes and terrible hand turkeys. The wind swept the leaves in playful circles, lifting orange confetti across the path like nature's slow applause. There was peace in that routine, predictability. She'd count the benches, one near the water fountain, one under the big tree, one facing the dog run. She'd walk, reciting the names of the last 5 patients who'd come into the clinic. A beagle named Toast, a rescue rabbit with frostbite, a cat who'd been hit by a bicycle, a goldfish named President Bubble, and Ellie stopped. Something shifted in the pattern of the world. Not a sound, not a sight, just stillness. Her eyes locked onto the base of the massive oak tree that stood at the center of the clearing. The kind of tree that seemed older than the town itself. Its thick roots cracked through the ground like the fingers of a sleeping giant. Beneath it, stretched across the yellowing grass, lay a large dog, motionless. She squinted. The sunlight filtered through the thinning branches, casting broken shadows across its back. The dog didn't move, didn't twitch, didn't turn its head. It could have been asleep. That's what most people might have thought. But not Ellie. Her breath caught lightly in her throat. She stepped closer, not too fast, not too slow. Her feet moved on instinct, the kind of instinct that comes from seeing what others missed. And she had seen it before. The way animals curl into corners of the clinic and hide pain in silence. The way their bodies speak even when they can't. This wasn't a nap. She glanced around. No one in sight. Just the hush of afternoon and a single breeze that tousled her bangs over her eyes. She tucked them back behind her ear and took another step forward. The dog was huge. At least 70 pounds, maybe more. Its fur was a blend of black and tan, thick across the shoulders and thinning slightly around the hips. German Shepherd, she thought. Male, adult. Probably older. His ears weren't perked. They lay low against his head, as if he'd spent too long listening for something that never came. Something about that broke her heart a little. She bent her knees slightly, crouching just out of reach. "Hey, buddy," she whispered. No response. She tried again, a bit louder, but kept her tone light, careful. "Are you okay?" The wind carried her voice toward him, but he didn't move. Not a flick of the ear. Not a glance. Her eyes moved to his paws, caked with mud, the kind that clings from walking far. His breathing, shallow but steady. The rise and fall was barely visible beneath his frame. Dehydrated maybe, exhausted for sure. Ellie stayed perfectly still for another long moment, letting him feel her presence. Her father always said that animals don't just sense fear. They set out the half-full bottle of water her grandmother always made her carry and took off the cap. She crouched lower, extending it gently across the grass, letting the scent of water reach him first. Still nothing. But something in her gut tightened, not in fear, in knowing. This wasn't just a lost dog. This was something else. Something sacred and silent, the kind of stillness that holds something deeper, like a story trapped behind ribs, too heavy to be told. And even though she didn't know what it was yet, Ellie did what she'd learned to do. She stayed, she watched, she listened. Because the wind in October doesn't blow for no reason. The closer Ellie got, the more the world seemed to hush around her. A squirrel paused mid-scurry on a nearby branch. Leaves swirled at her ankles but made no sound. Even the wind, that soft October hush, seemed to stop just shy of the old oak, like it too was holding its breath. The dog lay at the base of the tree, half in shadow, half in the gold-filtered light of late afternoon. Up close now, Ellie could see he was no ordinary stray. His coat, though matted in places, had once been meticulously kept, black across the back, with a saddle of fading tan that dipped down into powerful legs. German Shepherd. Definitely male. And older, maybe 6, maybe more. But not ancient. She had seen dogs like him before, not at the playground or behind fences, but in her father's clinic, usually accompanied by uniformed officers or soldiers, the kind who rarely smiled and spoke in brief, clipped sentences. Dogs like this one had jobs, purposes. They weren't supposed to be alone. And yet, here he was, not just alone, abandoned. But what unsettled Ellie wasn't his size, or even the fact that he hadn't moved since she first spotted him. It was the stillness, a kind of intentional stillness. The way his body curled, not entirely limp, not quite alert. Protective, as if guarding something he couldn't afford to lose. She crouched, careful not to step too close. Her father always said that sick or hurt animals often hide their pain behind silence, like people who've been strong for too long. "Hey there," she whispered again, voice barely louder than her breath. "I see you." No movement. His eyes were closed, lashes dark against his muzzle. But the rise and fall of his ribs was steady now, slower than she liked, but still there, still fighting. Ellie scanned his body with the quiet precision she'd watched her father use 100 times. His nose was cracked and dry. There were patches of fur along his flank that had thinned, revealing skin that looked sunburned or wind-bitten. The pad needed help. But she didn't move yet. Instead, Ellie shifted onto her knees, slowly setting down her water bottle on the grass between them. A peace offering, small but honest. Then she did something only a child raised in a vet clinic might do. She lowered her head, not submissively, but in silent acknowledgement, telling him with her body that she saw his pain and meant no harm. And that's when it happened. One ear twitched. Not much, just a flick. But it was enough to make Ellie hold her breath. She waited. The shepherd's breathing hitched, a slight catch in his chest, like he was waking from something deeper than sleep. His eyes fluttered open, slow, heavy-lidded, and when they met hers, Ellie felt something catch in her throat. They weren't the wild eyes of a stray, or the fearful gaze of a runaway. They were tired, but clear, brown, flecked with amber, intelligent, measured, old, in the way war veterans looked old, even in their youth. He didn't growl, didn't bark, just looked at her, not past her, not through her, at her, as if weighing whether she belonged in this moment. Ellie didn't speak. She only nodded once, slowly, and whispered, "It's okay, you don't have to be afraid." She walking for them, howden you. And in return the shepherd blinked. His body didn't rise, he didn't flinch or retreat. But his tail shifted slightly, not wagging but loosening. Like a tension inside him had given her a little more space. Encouraged, Ellie scooted forward an inch, then another. She kept her movements low and fluid, just as her father had taught her when approaching a hurt dog, too afraid to trust. "You're not out here for no reason," she said softly. "You don't look like you ran away. Someone left you." At that, the shepherd's head tilted slightly. Not much, just enough to acknowledge the words. But then something odd happened. Ellie noticed the way his body curved, not quite curled for sleep, but arched protectively, as if sheltering something beneath him. Her eyes narrowed. She leaned a little to the side, craning her neck, careful not to startle him. And then, under the shelf of his belly, half hidden in the golden brown of his coat, she saw something move. A paw, but not his, small, white, trembling. Ellie's heart leapt. Her eyes adjusted quickly, and within seconds she saw the truth. 3 tiny creatures, kittens, newborn, barely more than palm-sized. Huddled in a clump of fur, their eyes, inside him, refused to let go of duty. Ellie felt tears prick behind her eyes. It was the most silent, most fierce kind of love she had ever seen. She fumbled for her phone with shaking hands and called the one person she trusted to handle this right. "Dad," she whispered when he picked up, "I need you to come to the park, now. Bring a stretcher, warm towels, and kitten formula. Please hurry." Then she hung up and sat cross-legged on the grass, just a few feet away from the dog who hadn't moved again. He didn't need to, because Ellie understood now. He wasn't resting. He was holding the line. And until help arrived, she would sit with him, in the quiet shadow of the oak, and keep watch beside the warrior, who refused to let go. Ellie didn't realize she'd been holding her breath until the tiny paw moved again, just the smallest twitch beneath the German shepherd's chest. 3 of them. 3 kittens, barely the size of her cupped hand, pressed close to the heat of the old dog's body, as if they had known no other warmth since entering the world. Their fur was damp in patches, likely from his tongue cleaning them. Their bodies trembled, not from fear, but from being new to everything. She felt something tighten in her chest. Not panic, something quieter, deeper, like the way her mother used to squeeze her hand during thunderstorms. No words, just presence. That kind of knowing. "You're protecting them?" she whispered, the words more breath than sound. The shepherd didn't move, but something in him shifted. A kind of surrender. Or maybe trust. Ellie shuffled a little closer, slow and steady, her fingers splayed beside her on the grass, like she was anchoring herself to the moment. She could feel the wet chill in the dirt, but her focus was only on him, and the lives pressed against his rib cage. "Are they yours?" she asked gently, knowing it was a silly question. "No, but you're watching over them like they are." His eyes fluttered open again, heavy, amber, and sunken with fatigue, but alert, still alert, not a growl, not a flinch. Instead, the faintest tilt of the head, recognition maybe, or just exhaustion so deep it left no room for fear. The wind rustled the oak branches above them, sending a few tired leaves tumbling to the ground. One landed near Ellie's knee, half curled like a sleeping animal. She pressed her palm lightly to the earth and leaned forward just a little more. "I called my dad," she said softly. "He's a vet. He'll know what to do. We're going to help you, okay? But I'm not leaving you alone." The shepherd blinked again. She took that as permission, and so she stayed. Minutes passed, 10, maybe 15. Time lost shape beneath that tree. It was just Ellie, the shepherd, and the small, rhythmic breathing. Warmth. But she didn't. Something about the quiet sacredness of the dog's vigil held her still. This was not a rescue, not yet. This was a moment. And you don't interrupt moments like these. She glanced down again, letting her eyes take in the full picture, the sun dappling through the oak leaves, landing like soft halos over the shepherd's ears. The way his front paw had curled ever so slightly forward, forming a shield between the kittens and the world. Even his breathing, slow and even, was tuned to their presence. He was matching their rhythm, protecting them, not just with his body, but with his being. Ellie leaned forward on her elbows and whispered, "You remind me of someone." The shepherd looked at her. "My mom," she said. "She used to stay awake with orphan foals at the clinic all night. She said they needed a heartbeat near them to believe the world was safe." She smiled, eyes misting. "You're doing that for them." A small sound broke the moment. A mule, soft, high-pitched, and insistent. One of the kittens had pushed its tiny head out just enough that sunlight touched its fur, orange and white, streaked like a sunset. Its mouth opened again in a silent cry. The shepherd stirred, a twitch of the ear, a gentle nudge of the nose. He licked the kitten's back once, twice, with a tenderness that felt impossibly human. Ellie's throat tightened. "You're not just a dog," she whispered. "You're a guardian." It was then she noticed something else, a scar, faint but visible, running diagonally from just beneath the shepherd's left eye down toward his jowl. Not fresh, old, faded, but earned. A soldier's scar. And something about that clicked inside her. The posture, the silence, the way he hadn't whimpered or begged when she approached. This dog had known order, he had known purpose, he had once worn a badge. But now he wore nothing but dirt and fatigue. Her eyes drifted to his collar, faded leather, worn smooth with time and weather. There was a tag, partially buried in his fur, tarnished with grime and time. She reached for it, slowly, giving him time to object if he wanted. He didn't. The tag flipped under her fingers. Retired K9, Maximus, Unit 11, Minneapolis PD. Ellie inhaled sharply. Maximus, she murmured, tasting the name. It felt ancient, noble. She whispered it again, closer this time. Is that you? He looked at her, and for the briefest second she saw it. Not a wag, not a bark, but something flicker in his eyes. A piece of recognition, and waved toward the trail, heart pounding. Over here, she shouted. He's here. She turned back quickly, dropping to her knees again beside Maximus. They're coming, Maximus. You did good. You kept them safe. And this time, as the crunch of boots approached from behind, Maximus did something different. He lowered his head, and gently, without force, without fear, he rested it in Ellie's lap. She blinked fast to clear her eyes, and lifted a trembling hand to stroke his ear. It's okay, she whispered. You don't have to carry it all anymore. He sighed, a long, ragged exhale. And for the first time since she'd seen him, Maximus closed his eyes, not out of pain, but peace. The first thing Dr. Thaddeus Tran noticed as he stepped off the gravel trail into the clearing was how silent everything felt. It wasn't the hush of emptiness, but the kind of reverent stillness you find in hospital rooms, right before someone opens their eyes. Fragile, breath held, on the edge of something sacred. Over here, Dad, Ellie called, her voice low but urgent. She was kneeling beneath the massive oak tree, one hand resting gently on the head of a German shepherd, the other shielding something smaller by his belly. Her backpack lay tossed beside her, forgotten. Her face, normally bright and expressive, was focused, quiet with responsibility. Dr. Tran's assistant, Miriam, was already moving beside him, carrying the soft stretcher and portable kit. But he paused. The dog was enormous, clearly a shepherd, but with the kind of muscle and bearing that only came from years of training. His coat, once thick and proud, was now caked with leaves and dirt. His ribs pressed visibly against the skin. But even from a distance, what struck Thaddeus most was not the condition of the animal. It was the way the dog was curled, protectively, around something far more fragile. Are those? Miriam's voice faltered. Ellie nodded. 3 kittens, newborns. Thaddeus knelt slowly beside her. His knees cracked, a reminder of the years he'd spent crouched beside operating tables and kennels. But this moment felt different, more like an altar than an exam. He hasn't moved much, Ellie whispered, but he let me touch him. I think he knows I'm trying to help. Thaddeus reached out a careful hand, palm open. Hey there, big guy, he murmured. You've been through something, haven't you? Maximus stirred slightly, but didn't lift his head. His breath came shallow, steady. His eyes remained closed. Dehydrated, Thaddeus said, more to himself. Exhausted, possibly tiny mule, legs twitching. Cold, he said softly, but not hypothermic. That dog, he's kept them alive. Miriam had already unzipped the emergency pack. I've got glucose gel, warming wraps, and a small thermal dome. No dome, Thaddeus said gently. Not yet. We move slow. He turned back to Maximus. Listen, boy, he said, his voice low, like he would use for a spooked horse or a child on the edge of tears. We're gonna help you, but we need to move you, all right? Somewhere warm, clean, safe. You did your job. Now let us do ours." Maximus didn't respond, but his ear twitched toward Thaddeus' voice. That was enough. He looked at Ellie. "I want you to talk to him. Keep your voice soft. Let him hear you while we work." Ellie nodded, her face already damp with tears she hadn't even realized were falling. She leaned in close. "You're doing so good, Maximus. That's your name, right? I found it on your tag." At the sound, Maximus cracked open one eye. She smiled, voice cracking. "Yeah, I like that name too." Miriam moved carefully, sliding the thermal wraps beneath the kittens. One by one, she lifted them, cupped like fragile eggs in her gloved hands, and transferred them to the padded crate lined with a hot water bottle and fleece towels. Maximus shifted, his chest rising as if to protest, but Ellie placed her hand gently on his neck. "They're okay, see? We're just keeping them warm for you." Miriam held up one kitten, letting Maximus see her stroke its tiny back. The dog's eyes followed the motion, then settled again. Trust, fragile, but holding. "All right," Thaddeus said, motioning to the stretcher. "Let's do this slow." He and Miriam rolled the stretcher toward Maximus, positioning it beside his right side. Ellie stayed near his head, fingers trailing lightly through the fur behind his ears. When they lifted him, gently, two sets of arms supporting his spine and hindquarters, Maximus let out a soft whimper, but didn't resist. His gaze remained locked on the crate, on the soft mewling coming from inside. "He's watching them," Ellie whispered, "even now." "Keep talking to him, sweetheart," Thaddeus said as they strapped him in with padded harnesses. "Let him know he's not alone." "I'm here, Maximus. I promise. I won't let anyone take them. Or you." Her voice trembled, but her words didn't. The sun dipped lower behind the park's sycamores as they carried the stretcher toward the waiting van. Leaves crunched underfoot, and a few joggers passed by, unaware of the sacred thing unfolding beneath the port. Checked the slow drip of hydration. Then he looked at his daughter, eyes still wide, but no longer afraid, just hopeful, fiercely so. "He made it this far," he said. "That tells me everything." Ellie looked down at Maximus. His eyes were closed again, but his breathing had steadied, deeper now, less guarded. She reached over, pulling the crate of kittens closer, placing it beside him so he could feel them nearby. As the van rolled out of Grandview Park, Ellie kept her hand on Maximus's head, her thumb tracing slow circles behind his ear. "You don't have to protect them alone anymore," she whispered. "We've got you now." Outside the window, the trees blurred past, touched gold by the October sun. But inside the van, warmth, hope, and a quiet bond already forming in the space between. A tired dog, a girl with a steady heart, and 3 lives too small to remember the day they were saved, but forever changed by it. The Tran Family Clinic. Usually bright with fluorescent lights and quiet classical music, playing from the reception speaker, had taken on a softer, almost sacred hush that evening. It was well past closing time. The "open" sign had long since been flipped, and the last clients had gone home hours ago. Outside, the October wind ticked dry leaves against the window panes. But inside, in the recovery room, time moved differently. Slower, calmer, like the world was holding its breath for someone to heal. Maximus lay curled on a thick orthopedic pad in the far corner of the recovery suite, his body forming a protective crescent, a round-aligned box filled with fleece, low heat, and 3 softly sleeping kittens. A few IV tubes ran from a metal stand beside him into his foreleg, delivering slow hydration and nutrients. But nothing about the scene felt clinical. It felt intimate, chosen. Ellie had pulled one of the old wooden benches from the hallway and placed it just a few feet away. She lay curled on her side, a folded blanket under her head, her sweater pulled over her knees. The soft light from a nearby lamp glowed gold against her hair, casting a quiet shimmer across the tiles. She wasn't asleep yet, just watching. Maximus hadn't slept either. Not really. Every time one of the kittens made a sound, a twitch, a stretch, a broken mule, his ears would perk up. He'd lift his head slightly, nudge the edge of the box with his nose, and once satisfied that everything was all right, he'd settle back down. Dr. Tran had offered to move the kittens into a warmer, more insulated setup in the clinic's neonatal crate, a proper incubator. But Maximus had let out a low. Maximus's sighed. "You're like a big blanket," she whispered, pressing her cheek lightly to his fur. It was still a little coarse, not fully clean, but warm. Real. One of the kittens stirred, stretching a paw that was no bigger than a button. Maximus turned his head, gave the kitten a single, slow lick on the back. Ellie giggled under her breath. "You're a better babysitter than I am." The dog didn't respond, but she liked to imagine he was listening. She picked up a small notebook from her pocket, one she usually used to sketch animals in the clinic lobby. Flipping to a clean page, she began to draw. A big dog, 3 little kittens nestled in his belly, and a girl sitting close. Underneath it, she wrote in round looping letters, "Family, even when it doesn't look like one." When she looked up again, Maximus was watching her. His gaze wasn't intense, not the sharp, alert eyes of a working dog. This was something softer, a look that said, "I know you see me, and I see you too." Ellie scooted even closer and started to talk, her voice just above a whisper. "I used to read to the animals who were scared," she told him. "Dad said it helped them calm down. I don't have a book right now, but I can tell you a story." She cleared her throat gently, as if speaking into a hush made by candlelight. "Once upon a time, there was a knight. Not the kind with a sword or a shiny horse. This one had fur and teeth, and he wasn't afraid of dragons, but he was afraid of being alone. One day, the knight got really tired, so tired he almost gave up. But then—" She glanced down at the kittens, 2 asleep, one rolling over and burrowing deeper into Maximus's tail. "He found something smaller than himself, something even more helpless, and instead of leaving, he stayed." Maximus shifted slightly, sighing into the blanket. "And that's how the knight found his kingdom," Ellie whispered. "Not with a crown, but with kittens." She smiled, blinking back the tears that crept in when she didn't expect them. "You don't have to be brave all the time, Maximus. I think it's okay to be tired." The IV fluid continued its slow drip. Somewhere in the back of the clinic, the heating unit clicked on, humming gently like a lullaby. Outside, the wind had died down. The world was tucking itself in. Ellie looked up at the wall clock, nearly midnight. She yawned, long and soft, and climbed back onto the bench. But just as she began to lie down again, single lick. Nothing more. But to Ellie, it felt like a handshake, a thank you, a beginning. She smiled, eyes heavy. "Good night, Maximus," she whispered. In the gentle stillness of the clinic, surrounded by soft breath, new life, and the quiet weight of survival, sleep came easy. And for the first time in weeks, Maximus allowed himself to close both eyes. Not because he was no longer needed, but because, finally, he wasn't alone in the watching. The light had maved storms, especially Ellie is really in the room, near in way Maximus shave. Something about staying beside them had settled into her, like being trusted with a secret too important to ignore. Now, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside Maximus's resting form, Ellie traced her finger gently across the edge of his collar. It was thick leather, once black but now worn to a dark, weathered gray. Scratches marred the surface. The buckle had scuffs, but it was solid, purposeful, like it had seen things it didn't want to talk about. Her father entered the room quietly, a cup of tea in one hand, clipboard in the other. "You're up early," he said softly, crouching beside her. Ellie nodded. "Didn't want to miss anything." She looked down again at the collar, then pointed. "Can we check this now? I didn't want to take it off without you." Dr. Tran set his things down and gently leaned toward Maximus. The dog opened one eye, tracked the movement, but didn't move. His tail gave the smallest twitch, more acknowledgement than resistance. Dr. Tran smiled. "He's letting us." He carefully unbuckled the collar and turned it over in his hands. There, on the underside of the leather strap, a small tag hung by a rusted split ring. The metal was dull, edges chipped, but the words were still legible. Maximus, Retired Canine, Unit 11, Minneapolis PD. Dr. Tran froze for a moment, thumb pressed lightly against the tag as if weighing the weight of more than just words. "Police?" Ellie breathed, eyes wide. Her father gave a slow nod, jaw tightening in quiet surprise. And not just any dog, a canine, a working dog. These dogs are trained to serve, to protect. It means he probably had a handler. Ellie looked at Maximus again, this time with a kind of reverence. He's not just a good dog, he's a hero. Dr. Tran didn't say anything for a moment. He just stared at the tag, his mind already racing through possibilities. "I'll call in a few favors," he said at last. "I've worked with the city shelters upstate. They may have connections to the department." "Do you think someone's looking for him?" Ellie asked. "Maybe," he said, still staring at the name. "But if they are, they've been looking a long time." He didn't add the thought that followed. "Or maybe they've stopped." Maximus stirred then, lifting his head slowly, eyes blinking at the morning light. One of the kittens let out a short squeak, stretching its tiny limbs before curling back into Maximus's side. His body shifted to accommodate them, instinct more than thought. "I don't get it," Ellie whispered. "Why would a dog like that be out there all alone? Why didn't he go back?" Dr. Tran looked at her with a gentle sadness. "Sometimes the ones who protect the most are the ones who feel the most lost when they can't anymore." Ellie sat very still, those words pressing into her like something too big to carry, but too true to ignore. She leaned forward and carefully lifted the collar into her lap. She ran her fingers over the etched letters. Maximus. It felt heavy with stories, with missions, with streets walked and lives touched. And now, here he was, guarding kittens under an oak tree in a town that didn't even know his name. "I like his name," she said after a pause. "Maximus. It sounds strong." "It means the greatest," Dr. Tran replied, in Latin. Ellie looked at Maximus again, this time with new eyes. "Can I keep calling him that?" she asked. Her father smiled. "I think it's only fair. He earned it." Ellie reached out slowly and gently laid the collar back beside him. Maximus sniffed at it, then rested his chin atop it like a memory he couldn't let go of. The room fell quiet for a while. The clinic bustled softly outside the recovery suite, phones ringing, a dog barking in the waiting room, the shuffle of paws and papers and people. But in this little corner, time moved at a different rhythm. Slower, gentler. Ellie leaned in close to Maximus and whispered, "We're going to figure out your story, okay? You're not just a number. You're not lost anymore." And then, without warning, Maximus did something that stopped her breath. He leaned forward and pressed his nose into her palm, then gave it a single, quiet lick. Not frantic, not searching. It was deliberate, acknowledging. Ellie blinked hard, trying to keep the tears from slipping. But it was no use. They came anyway, sliding down her cheeks in quiet gratitude. It wasn't just a lick, it was permission. He was letting her in. She reached up and scratched gently behind his ear. "You don't have to protect anymore," she murmured. "But if you want to, we could protect each other." He sighed, low and slow, eyes softening until the lids fluttered shut again. Outside the room, the day moved return. The rain began just after sunrise. Soft at first, like fingers tapping on the roof of the Tran family clinic. Then heavier, like something unseen had finally let go. Ellie watched it from the waiting room window, knees tucked to her chest, Maximus curled at her feet. He didn't seem to mind the storm. In fact, his breathing stayed slow, ears only twitching slightly at the distant rumble of thunder. Inside Dr. Tran's office, the air felt different, thicker somehow. A laptop glowed dimly in the early light, and next to it sat Maximus's collar, the tag gently spinning with every small shift of wind from the cracked window. Dr. Tran's fingers hovered above the keyboard longer than they needed to. There was something sacred about reaching into another life's history, especially one built on silence and scars. Still, he began typing. Subject: Retired K9, Unit 11. Inquiry regarding Maximus. He included a photo Ellie had taken, just Maximus lying beside the kittens, his gaze steady and gentle. He didn't include the collar close-up, not yet. Something about it felt too personal. The email was short, direct, but written with the care of someone who understood what it meant to look for something or someone that the world had already let go of. He hit send. An hour passed. Then 2. By midday, the sky remained low and gray. Ellie stayed near Maximus the entire time, occasionally reading from a battered copy of The Wind in the Willows aloud, not for him necessarily, but because the sound filled the silence in a way that didn't feel forced. The reply came at 12:46 p.m. Dr. Tran opened it slowly, reading the words once, then again. Dear Dr. Tran, thank you for reaching out. According to our records, K9 Maximus of Unit 11, badge hashed K9117, was declared deceased in the line of duty 3 months ago. He and his handler, Officer Hannah Ridge, were involved in a building collapse during a narcotics raid in North Minneapolis. Officer Ridge's body was recovered. Maximus was never found. The debris and fire damage led to a presumption of death. A memorial was held in July. If you are certain this is the same dog, please contact us immediately. We are stunned. Sergeant Peter Knowles, Minneapolis PD, was Officer Hannah Ridge. She didn't survive. And they thought Maximus didn't either, Dr. Tran swallowed. They never found his body, so they assumed the worst. Ellie looked at Maximus, really looked, and suddenly so many things made sense. The way he startled at loud bangs, the way he curled around the kittens as if bracing against something, the way he watched doors, never quite trusting they'd stay closed. "He was in there," she whispered. "He got out, somehow." Dr. Tran nodded again. "And he didn't go back." A long silence passed between them, broken only by the ticking wall clock and the occasional roll of thunder. "But why?" Ellie finally asked. "Why wouldn't he go home? Didn't they look for him?" "They did, for a while. But sometimes when a bond is broken like that, so sudden, so traumatic, animals don't return the same way people expect them to." She turned toward Maximus again, kneeling in front of him. "You were grieving," she said softly. "You didn't run away, you just didn't know where to run to." Maximus's eyes didn't leave hers. He didn't move. But the stillness between them held more than words. Dr. Tran placed a comforting hand on her back. "The department's going to want to verify it's him. But I told them there's no doubt." Ellie nodded, though her throat tightened. "What happens now?" "They'll probably send someone. Maybe to see him, maybe just to talk." "Will they take him back?" Dr. Tran paused, weighing his answer. "They'll ask. But he's not government property anymore, Ellie. He's retired, technically presumed gone. And if he wants to stay, well, I think we both know where he belongs." She smiled then, a small trembling thing, but full of something that felt like hope. The mystery still lingered. How had Maximus gotten out? How far had he traveled? How did he find a park in Wisconsin, hundreds of miles away, and decide to stop beneath a single oak tree? Some questions wouldn't have answers, but others, Ellie believed, would come in time. As the afternoon light finally began pushing through the clouds, Maximus rose slowly to his feet. The kittens squeaked in protest, but he nudged them gently, arranging his body around them once more. Not quite ready to rest, but ready to stay. And somewhere, on a quiet desk in a police department miles away, an old case file would soon be pulled from a drawer, the word "deceased" quietly crossed out. Not forgotten, just found. The clinic was silent except for the low hum of a heater and the steady rhythm of Maximus lived, piecing together a story stitched from instinct and sorrow. Her eyes kept returning to Maximus's flank, rising, falling. A scar traced the ridge of his shoulder like an unfinished thought. His ears twitched in sleep. One paw trembled slightly, as if bracing against something that wasn't there anymore. She whispered into the quiet, "I know you're still in it, Max." And then she closed her eyes and imagined. It starts in the dark, a silence too heavy to be night. Choking dust, metal groaning like a dying thing, and the smell of gasoline. There had been shouting, crumbling. A final command shouted by a voice he knew better than his own heartbeat. "Go, Max!" He hadn't gone. Not at first, but the floor split, the heat rose, and the leash, so taut a moment ago, had gone slack in an instant. Then silence. When Maximus wakes, it's to smoke and ruin. One leg pinned beneath a beam, lungs burning. He doesn't whimper. He doesn't cry. He waits, then moves. Bone grinds. Muscles scream. But he pushes, once, twice, and the beam shifts. He stumbles forward, disoriented. There's no light, just heat. Cracks in the wall. His nose is filled with ash, but beneath it all, something else. Blood. He howls. The sound dies in the rubble. No answer. And so he moves, through crevices, across fire-kissed concrete, stepping over things he refuses to recognize. Every cell in his body screams for her, for Hannah. But she's gone. He doesn't know where he's going, only that he can't stop. A soldier without command, a protector without purpose. The door he finds is half-hinged, crooked, like the world itself had given up holding things in place. He slips out into the night. Ellie's pencil slipped from her hand. It hit the floor with a faint click. She blinked. Maximus hadn't moved, but something in the room had changed. Like air thick with a storm that hadn't broken yet. She leaned in closer, fingers brushing gently against his front paw. It was warm, steady, but she could feel it. Beneath the surface, a restlessness never quite silenced. She imagined him wandering through the woods after that, leaves stuck to his coat, paws bleeding, scent confused, avoiding people, not out of fear, but out of grief, as if he couldn't bear the sound of footsteps that didn't belong to her. Officer Hannah Ridge. Ellie didn't know what she looked like, but in her mind she imagined a woman with sun-warmed skin, a firm grip, and a laugh that could cut through the darkest nights. Someone Maximus had trusted with the totality of his being, someone he would have died for. Deep. Maximus wasn't running from the past, he was still walking inside it, still waiting for a voice that would never return. Ellie stood quietly and walked across the room. The sketch pad was still blank, but she took a crayon, green, and began to draw. A field, a tall oak tree, and under it, a dog curled around 3 tiny kittens. Above them, in the sky, a woman's shadow, not frightening, not ghostly, but gentle, smiling, hand resting on the hilt of her badge. When she finished, Ellie whispered, "You didn't fail her, Max. You brought her heart with you." She tiptoed back to his crate, careful not to startle him, and then, without hesitation, slid the drawing beneath his paw. Maximus stirred slightly, one eye opening. His gaze met hers, exhausted but aware. He didn't bark, didn't move, but his paw stayed on the paper. A silent acknowledgement, a war memorial built not of stone, but of presence, of staying, of surviving, of carrying love across ruins. The rain had stopped sometime after midnight, leaving the windows of the Tran family clinic fogged with the breath of dawn. Inside, the air smelled faintly of chamomile tea and antiseptic, a strange but oddly comforting mix. Everything was quiet, except the steady hum of a heater and the occasional chirp of a warming lamp. Ellie sat cross-legged just a few feet from Maximus's crate, her blanket tucked up to her chin. She hadn't meant to fall asleep, but after hours of whispering stories to Maximus, sketching little drawings of kittens and leaves, her eyelids had betrayed her. And then, from the silence, "Meow." It was faint, high-pitched, almost questioning, like the world had asked a question and was waiting to be answered. Maximus jerked awake. His head shot up, ears pointed sharply toward the small bundle nestled beneath his body. His body shifted instinctively, shoulders stiffened, eyes scanning the room. His breathing grew faster, not out of panic, but of urgency, the primal alertness of a protector who'd once walked through fire. Ellie blinked awake, startled by the motion. Another tiny mew followed, this one more insistent. Maximus let out a low, guttural huff, not a growl but something ancient, watchful, protective, a sound that said, "They are mine." Ellie scrambled to her knees and leaned forward. "It's okay," she whispered, holding her palms up as if approaching a wild deer. "It's just me, Max. I heard it too." Maximus didn't take his eyes off her, but after a few seconds, he shifted ever so slightly to the side. And there they were, 3 little lives, blinking and blinking again against the amber light of the warming lamp. Damp fur clung to fragile bodies, tiny paws curled and uncurled. Their eyes weren't even fully open, but their instincts were. One let out a click. Dr. Tran stepped in, followed by his assistant, May. They were carrying supplies, syringes, heated towels, tiny formula bottles. When they saw Ellie on the floor and Maximus awake, standing sentinel over 3 newborn kittens, both of them paused. For a heartbeat, no one said anything. Then May murmured, "Oh my God." Dr. Tran crouched beside Ellie, his eyes moving from the kittens to Maximus's sharp gaze. "We move slow," he said softly, "like we're in the presence of something sacred." Ellie nodded. "He won't let them go, but I think he trusts me." Dr. Tran turned to May. "Warm formula, 2 bottles, not more than 10 milliliters each, and bring the eyedropper in case we need to start smaller." May disappeared. Maximus didn't growl, didn't lunge, but his body was a sculpture of restraint, every muscle ready to defend. His eyes tracked every movement. Ellie reached out, gently, carefully. "I promise," she said, voice like breath. "We're just here to help." She placed her hand on the towel beside the kittens. One of them, the noisiest, reached out a paw and latched onto her finger. It was no bigger than a grape. Ellie laughed, a soft, tear-soaked sound. "Hi," she whispered. "You're loud." Maximus let out a huff, and for the first time, it didn't feel like a warning. It felt like a sigh. May returned and handed the bottles to Dr. Tran, who crouched low and extended one near the smallest kitten. Maximus stiffened. Ellie held up a hand. "Let me do it," she said. Her father hesitated, then nodded. She knelt, hands steady despite the tremble in her chest, and brought the bottle toward the little mouth. It took a few seconds, but then, miracle of miracles, the kitten latched. The smallest suckling sound filled the room. Maximus leaned in, watching every second, his nose just inches from a kitten's side. He didn't move, didn't breathe, only watched. Like the weight of the world was resting on a drop of milk. 2 kittens fed, the third resisted, wriggling and whimpering. Ellie rocked it in her palms, like she'd seen her mother do with crying babies in church. After a few tries, the kitten accepted the bottle. Maximus licked its ear when it finished. Dr. Tran watched silently. He removed his glasses and wiped them on the hem of his coat, though they weren't fogged. "I've never seen anything like it," he said. "No aggression, no rejection." "Whisker, she's got a little tuft on her lip already." And the smallest one, the quiet one, clinging to Maximus's chest. Ellie's voice softened. "That's Clover, because finding them feels like finding luck when you need it most." Maximus exhaled, deep and slow, and Ellie smiled. She reached out and gently placed her hand on his massive paw. "You're their guardian," she said, "but maybe you're ours too." Maximus turned to her, and for the first time since that terrible day in the park, the lines in his face seemed to ease. Just a little. Like maybe, for a moment, he wasn't carrying the whole world. Just 3 tiny lives, and the girl who saw through his silence. The photo had only been online for 43 minutes. It was taken quietly, almost by accident, by Tasha, one of the new vet interns shadowing Dr. Tran for her final year of school. She hadn't meant to cause a stir. She just wanted to capture the moment. Maximus curled protectively around the 3 kittens, all of them sleeping, their tiny bodies rising and falling against the rhythmic breath of a dog who looked like he'd once fought off the world. The post was simple, no hashtags, no dramatic filters. "Today I saw something I'll never forget." A retired K9 found guarding 3 newborn kittens in the woods. He wouldn't leave them. He's still guarding them now. If this isn't loyalty, I don't know what is. Attached was the photo. Warm lamplight spilling across Maximus's tired eyes, a kitten resting on his paw, another tucked under his chin. Tasha clicked post, thinking maybe a few classmates would find it sweet. She had no idea. By the time Ellie arrived at the clinic that morning, hair still damp from her rushed shower, backpack half-zipped, the front door was already flanked by 2 local reporters and a woman holding a microphone labeled Channel 5 News. Dr. Tran stood at the entrance, arms crossed, calm but firm. "I appreciate your interest," he told them, "but the dog's under medical evaluation, and the child involved is a minor. We're not doing interviews." The man in the plaid jacket didn't back down. "We're just looking for a quote, Doc. You gotta admit, it's a heck of a story." "That post has over 100,000 shares already," Dr. Tran blinked. 100,000? The woman added, "We've had calls from regional outlets. Even an animal rights group in Oregon wants to fly out and meet the dog. They're calling him the Silent Guardian." Inside, Ellie paused just behind the glass door, watching the exchange. She didn't like the way they said it. The Silent Guardian, like he was some cartoon character, a symbol, something to be packaged, shared, dissected. Not a living creature with wounds no one could see. She slipped past.
"Have no idea what's happening out there, do you?" she whispered. "Everyone wants a piece of your story." Maximus turned his head, eyes meeting hers with that familiar, steady gravity. "I won't let them turn you into a headline." She reached over, brushing the crumb of lint from his ear. But even as she said it, her phone buzzed again. It was her friend Jessica. "You're on the news, Elle. Literally, like on the news. They showed the picture, said your name, said your dad's clinic. You're trending in Minnesota. Holy crap." Ellie locked the screen without replying. By midday, the clinic's voicemail was full. Dr. Tran pulled down the shades. He spoke gently to Tasha, the intern, who sat on a stool with wide, tearful eyes. "I didn't mean for it to go viral," she whispered. It was so beautiful, I wanted to share it." "I know," Dr. Tran said, "but the internet doesn't just take things, it spins them." Outside, a second car with media tags pulled up. Ellie felt it closing in. Reporters asking for Maximus's rescue footage. Offers to buy the photo rights. A podcast host wanting to feature the emotional bond between interspecies trauma survivors. None of them had seen the way Maximus jolted awake when someone dropped a clipboard. None of them had heard the tiny mule that brought him to his feet. Every time, like instinct was stronger than pain. None of them had watched the way he licked Clover's tiny head after every feeding. They just wanted the miracle, not the weight behind it. At one point, a woman pushed past the clinic doors despite May's protests. "I just want to see him," she said breathlessly.
I don't need to touch, just a picture for my blog. Maximus let out a low growl from inside the exam room. Dr. Tran stepped between her and the doorway like a gate. This is not a zoo, he said evenly. This dog is a trauma survivor, and right now, his world is 3 kittens and a girl with quiet hands, nothing else. The woman left, muttering about wasted potential. By evening, Ellie curled up on the small sofa beside Maximus's recovery space. She had drawn the curtains herself, taped a piece of paper on the glass. Do not disturb. He's resting. Maximus pressed his nose gently against her leg. You did everything right, she whispered to him. They just want stories. But I see you. Not just what you did, but who you are. His tail gave a faint twitch, then something softer. He leaned his head against her foot, not because he was tired, but because he chose to. Outside the clinic, the world was still buzzing. Posts, shares, headlines. But inside that small, warm room, the only thing that mattered was the rhythm of breathing, the soft sounds of purring, and the loyalty of one creature who'd survived the wreckage of duty and found something worth protecting again. It was the morning. No ringing phones, no delivery vans. Even the kittens seemed to nap longer than usual, curled in their fleece-lined bed beside Maximus. Ellie sensed the hush wasn't peace. It was expectation, holding its breath. At 11:04 a.m., the first black car arrived. Then the second. Ellie was adjusting the height of the IV line when May poked her head into the recovery room. Ellie, sweetheart, she said, soft but formal. You and Maximus might have company. The front door chimed. Dr. Thaddeus Tran stepped forward to greet a woman in a long gray coat, flanked by 2 aides and a photographer with a city seal around his neck. Her heels clicked against the tile with a rhythm too precise for this humble veterinary clinic. Mayor Callahan, Dr. Tran greeted with a gentle nod. Dr. Tran, I hope this isn't an intrusion, she replied, scanning the room with political grace. We've been flooded with messages about your special guest. Maximus didn't lift his head, but his eyes opened, wide, watching. Mayor Callahan continued, we wanted to express the town's gratitude and to let you know that the City Council has unanimously voted to allocate emergency animal care funds, specifically for Maximus and any future cases like his. She paused. He deserves more than just admiration. He deserves care. Dr. Tran offered a reserved smile. That's kind of you, but Maximus isn't a symbol. He's a patient, a living being with needs. Callahan glanced at the glass wall behind him. May I? He hesitated, then nodded. She walked slowly into the recovery room, careful not to cross the invisible boundary Ellie had once described to him, the one Maximus maintained between safety and overwhelm. Ellie stood. Callahan's voice softened. Hello there, Maximus. He stared at her. His ears twitched once. I was briefed on his background, she said, turning to Ellie now. Minneapolis PD K9 Unit 11, assigned to Officer Hannah Ridge. Ellie nodded. Callahan's gaze softened. I attended her funeral. The room grew still. I remember, she continued, how her father trembled as he accepted the flag, how the canine leash was placed beside the empty boots. I remember wondering where the dog had gone. At the sound of Ridge's name, Maximus stirred, not dramatically, not in panic, but his ears rose. His breathing shifted, like someone calling his name in a dream. Ellie moved closer, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. Callahan noticed. Her tone changed. I'm not here to parade him around, but I am here because stories like his cut through the noise. We forget sometimes that grief isn't just for humans, that duty doesn't switch off when the mission ends. Ellie blinked hard. Outside, the wind picked up, sending a few golden leaves tumbling past the clinic windows. Mayor Callahan reached into her coat and pulled out a small envelope. We'd like to offer. Officer Ridge's family requested that if Maximus were ever found, he'd be given this. Ellie accepted it with both hands. Inside was a single photograph. Officer Ridge, crouching beside Maximus, both in uniform, She was laughing, mid-motion, her arm draped around his neck. Maximus looked alert, proud, but somehow softer, standing beside her. On the back, in blue ink, was a note. Maximus, you were my shield and my shadow. If I fall, keep guarding something good. H.R. Ellie folded the photo slowly, hands trembling. Maximus was still watching. She knelt beside him and whispered, "You did what she asked." A long pause. Then, for the first time in days, Maximus gently nudged his nose against her arm, not out of need, but as if in quiet agreement. Callahan stood in the doorway, her voice quieter now. "Thank you for protecting what's good, Maximus." No more words were needed. By the time she and her aides left, the mood in the clinic had changed, not lighter, but deeper, like a stone had been dropped into the still water, and the ripples would last for weeks. That evening, Ellie placed the photograph in a small wooden frame and set it beside Maximus's bed. Ash batted at it with a tiny paw, then settled back into the crook of Maximus's leg. And Maximus, watching them all, finally closed his eyes again, not to escape, but to rest, for just a while. The clinic after hours always felt different. The fluorescent lights dimmed, the sounds of busy footsteps and phones gave way to the soft hum of machines and the quiet breaths of healing animals. It was a place of pause, of in-betweens. Ellie sat cross-legged on the floor beside Maximus's bed. The kittens were curled into his side, purring in unison, their little bellies rising and falling like synced tides. Ash was the warmest, Clover the squirmiest, and Whisker had a habit of crawling up Maximus's chest like he owned the world. Maximus didn't move, but his tail gave a single thump every now and then, like a heartbeat she could hear with her eyes. She was humming a lullaby her mother used to sing, tracing circles on the blanket with her finger, when she heard it. Two voices, from the other room, soft, muffled.
Placement starts Monday. At that age, they'll adapt quickly.
It's probably better to separate them, honestly. Too much bonding in a litter can make future socializing harder.
She froze. It was May's voice, followed by someone else, one of the vet techs probably. Ellie didn't move, didn't breathe, just listened. "And Maximus, there's still talk of transporting him to the retired K9 sanctuary. They've got staff trained in—" She didn't hear the rest, because her chest had already clenched so tight she thought something inside might snap. She stood up, quietly, and peeked around the corner. May was looking at a clipboard, calm, detached, just doing her job. Ellie ducked back. Her throat ached. Not from tears yet, but from trying to stop them. She waited until the hallway was quiet again before moving. In the recovery room, Maximus blinked at her as she returned. His ears twitched. He knew something had changed. She knelt beside him, burying her face into his ruff. The scent of warm fur, antiseptic and faint earth clung to him like memory. "I won't let them take you," she whispered. "Or them." One of the kittens stirred, mewing softly. Ellie pulled back, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "We're a team now, remember? A real family." Maximus didn't answer, of course, but he nudged her knee with his nose, just once, gentle, assuring. Later that night, at the dinner table, the storm inside her finally broke. "I heard what Aunt May said," she blurted out between bites of cold rice, "that they're going to separate the kittens and send Maximus away." Dr. Tran looked up from his bowl. So did her mother. "Ellie," her father began, voice careful. "No," she said louder than she meant to. "You can't let them, please." "Sweetheart," May said gently, "they'll all be going to good homes, people who've been screened. It's not a bad thing." "But it is," Ellie cried. "They're a family. Maximus protects them. They sleep on him, Aunt May. They need each other." Silence filled the room like fog. Her mother reached across the table, touching her hand. "We understand, but keeping 3 kittens and a retired K9, it's not easy. The clinic's resources are already—" "Then I'll help," Ellie pleaded. "I'll clean cages. I'll feed them at night. I'll study everything you give me. I'll earn it." Dr. Tran looked at his daughter then, not just as a child, but as someone who had quietly changed in these past few days. There was something different in her voice now, not just desperation, conviction. "I'm not asking because they're cute," Ellie continued, softer now. "I'm asking because they saved each other, and because maybe they saved me too." She glanced at Maximus, visible just beyond the open door to the recovery room, the way he rested but never too deeply, the way his eyes always flicked to the kittens first before closing again. "I don't know what happened to him in that warehouse, but I know one thing. He didn't give up, not even after everything. He still chose to protect something small,
Something helpless. Doesn't that mean he gets to stay with them?" Her voice cracked on that last word. Her parents exchanged a long, quiet look. That night, as Ellie lay curled on the bench beside Maximus again, her father came in. He didn't say anything right away, just watched them, the girl, the dog, and the 3 kittens nestled between them. Then he knelt beside her and whispered, "Okay." Ellie blinked. "You keep your promise," he added. "You study, you help, you learn what responsibility means." She sat up, barely breathing. "We'll keep them together, all of them. But Maximus stays under clinic supervision for now. Understood?" She nodded so hard her ponytail bounced. And when she turned to Maximus, the old dog was watching her. He didn't wag his tail, but he didn't need to. He simply rested his head atop the tiny mound of kittens and closed his eyes again. Not in exhaustion this time, but in something closer to peace. Because, for the first time since the rubble, since the flames, since the voice of his partner fell silent, he knew he wasn't being left behind. It was close to midnight when the first bark echoed down the clinic hallway, not loud, not frantic, but sharp, measured. The kind of bark that held weight behind it, not noise, but intent. Ellie stirred on her bench in the side room. The kittens were curled around her stomach like warm stones. Maximus had been sleeping soundly beside them, or so she thought. Now, the bench was cold where his body had been. She sat up, listened. Another bark. This time lower, a growl beneath it. She blinked the sleep from her eyes and crept out, barefoot, the hem of her oversized flannel brushing her ankles. The hall lights had been dimmed, but even in half-darkness she could see his silhouette, tall, alert, shoulders taut like a coiled spring. Maximus stood facing the back door of the clinic, ears perked, tail stiff. His chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, but his entire posture had shifted, from exhausted guardian to trained sentinel. "Maximus," she whispered. He didn't look back. Instead, he inched toward the door, sniffed along the baseboard, then gave a single, low huff. Ellie approached slowly, whispering, "It's okay, boy. There's nothing." But before she could finish, he took off, his claws tapping against the floor as he turned the corner toward the staff wing. She followed on instinct. No time to think. Maximus paused at the break room door. His nose twitched. He gave a single bark, then sat back, tail sweeping once across the tile. Ellie caught up, panting slightly. "What is it?" She opened the door. The scent of old coffee and heating vents hit her first. Then she saw the motion sensor nightlight. Ellie could see it, the sweat at her hairline, the tension in her jaw. Maximus stepped forward, nose hovering just inches from May's leg. "Is she okay?" Ellie asked, suddenly unsure. May groaned softly, not quite waking. Dr. Tran arrived seconds later, called by the noise. It didn't take long after that, tests, scans, and quiet concern blooming into urgency. May had been ignoring pain for days. An inflamed appendix, dangerously close to rupture. Maximus had known. He'd smelled it, something buried deep beneath the skin.
Not infection exactly, but imbalance, distress, like he had once been trained to. The next day, Ellie sat beside his crate, feeding him chicken from her lunchbox. "You're not just guarding anymore, are you?" she whispered. "You're reading things." Maximus watched her, slow blinks. Stress, illness, fear. She chewed her bottom lip, then added, "I think you still have work to do." At that his ears twitched. She reached out, touching the scarred tag that hung loosely on his collar. "Even if you're retired, you're still you." Maximus leaned into her touch. Not much, just a fraction. But it was enough to tell her he understood, or at least accepted the weight of her words. Over the next few nights, the clinic began to change. Maximus would rise from sleep without warning, pad toward a specific patient's cage. Sometimes it was a pregnant cat whose labor was starting early. Sometimes it was an old terrier trembling from seizures too subtle for the monitors to pick up. He never panicked, never barked for attention unless it was necessary, but when he did, everyone listened. One evening, Ellie was helping refill supplies when she tripped over a mop bucket left in the hallway. She caught herself, heart thudding, breath shallow. Before she could even curse the pain in her elbow, Maximus was there, his nose at her side, whining low. "I'm fine," she mumbled, but he didn't leave. He circled her twice, sat at her feet, and stared. It wasn't until hours later that her father noticed her flushed skin. The fever came on, slow but steady. A quiet infection from a scrape 2 days ago. Nothing serious, caught early, but once again, Maximus had known first. "I think he's recalibrating," Dr. Tran told the staff during one of their debriefings. Canine units are trained to detect everything from narcotics to hormonal changes. Retired or not, some instincts don't switch off. They adapt. He looked at Ellie then, especially when they find something new to protect. She didn't respond aloud, but her hand found Maximus's shoulder that night as they sat beside the kittens. She buried her fingers in his fur, feeling the quiet pulse beneath. Maximus didn't speak, of course, but his presence was louder than words. The wind that morning carried a chill that crept through the walls of the clinic, curling waves of gold and rust. Inside, it was quiet. The kind of stillness that comes not from peace, but from waiting. Maximus had been different since the night with Aunt May. He no longer stayed confined to one corner, no longer slept with one eye always open. He moved with purpose now, soft-footed, deliberate. He was becoming something else. Not quite a patient, not just a retired canine, something in between. In the cat ward, a ginger tabby named Pippin thrashed inside his crate. Recent surgery had left him groggy and disoriented. His yowls were sharp, echoing down the sterile hallway, like a cry that didn't want to be heard. No one could calm him, not even soft music, not even Tui, the best tech for feline cases. Until Maximus walked in. He didn't bark, didn't whine. He just approached the crate, sat down slowly, and stared through the wire. Pippin paused mid-howl, eyes locked. Then, slowly, shockingly, he slumped down. A long breath escaped his mouth, and the cage stilled. Tue blinked. Did he just hypnotize the cat? Dr. Tran, watching from the glass pane in the hall, only smiled. No, he just reminded him he wasn't alone. Word spread through the clinic in hushed reverence. The patients began to respond. Not all, but enough to notice. The jittery husky that refused anesthesia unless Maximus was nearby. The parakeet that stopped fluttering its wings every time he passed. the litter of abandoned pups who wouldn't eat until his nose nudged their bowl. It was Ellie who whispered the phrase first. He's like therapy in fur. But nothing captured that truth more clearly than the woman who entered just before closing that Thursday evening. Her name was Mrs. Lillian Greer, late 70s, dressed in a wool coat too heavy for fall, and shoes scuffed with years of wear. She carried a carrier box covered in a blanket, cradled close like something sacred. Inside it, a dying cat named Clementine. Cancer had taken her appetite. Her sight was already fading. Mrs. Greer's hands trembled when she set the box down on the steel exam table. "She was my husband's cat," she murmured. "He passed last spring. She stopped eating a week after." Dr. Tran said soft things, offered fluids, pain relief, comfort care. There wasn't much else to offer. Ellie stood by the counter, unsure what to do. Then, "Maximus," and "once," she whispered. "Before the war took his voice." She looked down. But Clementine, she was the only thing that made him laugh again. Ellie stood still, breath tight in her throat. The room was quiet except for the cat's shallow breaths, and the soft huff of Maximus's nose against Mrs. Greer's wrist. In that moment, grief recognized grief. Silence held silence, and Maximus, once a creature of command and discipline, now became a bridge between loss and memory, between goodbye and still holding on. After Clementine was sedated and taken to the back for end-of-life care, Mrs. Greer lingered in the waiting room. Ellie brought her tea. Maximus lay at her feet, eyes half closed. "I don't know what he is," the old woman said quietly, staring into the steam, "but it's something close to holy." Ellie didn't speak. She couldn't. But as Maximus lifted his head and rested it gently on the woman's knee, she knew the words weren't needed. Later that night, Ellie found her father cleaning the instruments in the surgical bay. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Did you know he could do that?" Dr. Tran paused, a towel in one hand. "Do what?" "Heals people," she said simply. He gave a soft smile, one shaped by long years and harder truths. "No one heals anyone, Ellie. Not really. But sometimes. We make it easier for others to carry what hurts." He placed the towel down and turned to her. "That dog has lost more than most people can imagine, and yet he stays soft where it counts." Ellie walked back to the sleeping area, where the kittens were curled against a heating pad. Maximus was already there, watching them like he always did. She sat beside him, wrapping her arms around his thick frame. "You're not just a hero," she whispered. "You're the part that stays after the rescue." Maximus closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. Outside, the night deepened. But inside, something warm flickered back to life. It arrived tucked between the folds of a brown envelope, its corners softened by travel, the ink faded just enough to speak of time, not carelessness. No return address, only a name scrawled in careful cursive across the back flap: Margaret Ridge. Ellie found it on the clinic's front counter late in the afternoon, just as the rain began to whisper against the windows. One of those soft, gray downpours that makes the whole world sound like it's holding its breath. She turned it over twice in her hands, unsure what to expect. Her fingers trembled a little when she tore it open. Inside was a single page, folded 3 times, smelling faintly of lavender and old paper. She read the first line in silence, then sat down beside Maximus. The lights were dim in the recovery room. The kittens had just been fed and were curled together on a soft fleece pad, their tiny bellies rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Maximus lay nearby, his head watching. Ellie knelt beside him and began to read aloud. "Dear Ellie, I hope this letter finds you in warmth and peace. I am Margaret Ridge. My daughter was Officer Hannah Ridge of Unit 11, Minneapolis Police Department. You don't know me, but I believe you've met someone very dear to me. Someone I thought we'd lost. Ellie glanced at Maximus. His ears twitched slightly at the name Ridge, but he didn't move. She continued. Maximus wasn't just a dog. He was Hannah's shadow, her confidant, her partner in every call, every case, every corner of danger this city could offer. He was with her when she helped rescue the Mitchell children from that warehouse fire. He was the one who tracked the missing boy through 12 miles of frozen woods and found him alive. Ellie's voice wavered, but she kept going. There's a reason they called him the dog that wouldn't quit. Even off duty, he used to patrol the backyard fence like it was state property. One night, I asked Hannah why he was always so alert. She smiled and said, because Max doesn't protect because I tell him to. He protects because he was made for it, even if no one asks. A tear slipped down Ellie's cheek. She didn't bother to wipe it away. She reached out, resting her hand gently on Maximus's shoulder. He blinked slowly, not quite asleep, listening. When the warehouse collapsed and they said Maximus was gone, something in me refused to believe it. Not because I doubted the evidence, but because it didn't feel like an ending he would choose. And now, I hear that he's found his way to you, that he's still watching over others, that even in grief, even after loss, he's still who he always was. Thank you, Ellie, for seeing him, for not looking away, for letting him keep doing what his heart won't stop telling him to do. I don't know what will become of you both, but I truly hope, he stays. If he chooses you, that means something. With gratitude deeper than words, Margaret Ridge. By the time she folded the letter shut, Ellie was crying, quietly, shoulders trembling, one hand still resting against Maximus's warm fur. She buried her face against him, whispering things only he could hear. Your heart never broke, did it? She murmured. You just carried all the pieces. Maximus let out a soft exhale, deep and steady, as if releasing something too heavy for even him to bear until now. Then, for the first time that day, he shifted. He moved closer and laid his head in her lap. Ellie stroked the fur between his ears in silence. Outside, the rain continued its soft tapping on the glass, a lullaby for wounds that would never quite scar over, but might one day stop. She pinned the letter to the corkboard in the back office, just above the X-ray viewer, beside a photo of the kittens, and under a flyer that read, Retired Canines Need Love Too. But before she left, she wrote a single line beneath it on a yellow sticky note. He wasn't lost. He was still on duty. Then she walked back to the recovery room and lay beside Maximus, blanket tucked over her legs, hand resting gently on the side of his neck. And in that quiet, between the hum of machines and the steady breaths of sleeping kittens, the past found a place to rest beside the future. It started, as these things often did, with a quiet suggestion no one expected to take root. One Tuesday morning, under the haze of spring light filtering through the front windows of Tran Family Veterinary Clinic, a man in a brown city-issued jacket stood holding a clipboard, shifting awkwardly from foot to foot. Guardian Companion Unit, he repeated, nodding once like he was still convincing himself. Ellie blinked. She was midway through labeling formula bottles for the kittens. Ash was already mewing from inside his warming nest, and the phrase sounded like something from a cartoon. Dr. Tran looked up from the counter. Is that a task force? The man chuckled. Not exactly. It's more of a pilot initiative. We've been getting calls from schools, homes for the elderly, even first responder units. They all read the story about Maximus and the kittens. His eyes softened, flicking toward the recovery room behind the glass, where Maximus lay curled beside a warming pad, Clover nestled between his paws. They're asking if he visits, if there are more like him. Dogs who've seen hard things and come out gentler for it. Dr. Tran leaned back, contemplative. You want to make him a mascot. The man shook his head. We want to make him a mentor. Later that evening, Ellie stood beside Maximus in the clinic yard. The air was thick with honeysuckle, the sounds of a town settling down. Across the street, someone was barbecuing. Children's laughter drifted faintly through an open window. Maximus's gaze swept the sidewalk with quiet precision. He had always done that, scanning, tracking, guarding, even when resting. Ellie crouched beside him. They want you to teach other dogs, she said softly, ones that came from shelters, from broken homes, dogs nobody believed in. Maximus didn't move, but his ears twitched. I guess they think, maybe if they saw you, they'd remember who they could be. She smiled faintly. I would. The next week moved like pages turning in a book they hadn't realized they were writing. The clinic was approved as the central hub for the new Guardian Companion Unit, a first-of-its-kind program pairing retired K9s and printed photo of Maximus. His face solemn, eyes watchful, standing sentinel beside the kitten nest. Above it in bold letters,
Still serving, still saving.
Below it, handwritten in Dr. Tran's unmistakable pen, Lead Guardian Maximus, retired K9. On Thursday, Ellie was called into the break room. A strange silence followed her in, her mother trying not to smile, her father clearing his throat more times than necessary. There was a small white envelope on the table. Her name was written on it in gold ink. She opened it with shaking fingers. Inside was a simple card, official letterhead, gold emblem, embossed seal. The Guardian Companion Unit hereby appoints Ellie Tran, age 8, to the position of Honorary Handler, Unit Lead Support, in recognition of her courage, compassion, and unwavering trust. Where he goes, she follows. Department of Animal Welfare, Central District. That night, she read it aloud to Maximus. He listened, as always, without blinking. But when she whispered,
It's official now. I'm your person.
His tail thumped once against the floor. She grinned and laid her cheek against his chest.
You already knew, didn't you?
Soon the first batch of rescue dogs began to arrive. They came in different shapes, sizes, and stories. A scarred husky who flinched at the sound of keys. A one-eyed golden retriever with a bite history, but a heart like butter. A mutt who'd been tied to a tree through 2 winters before someone noticed. Ellie sat beside Maximus the first time they were brought into the yard. His posture was alert but calm, like a teacher watching new students figure out the classroom. One by one they came closer, not too close, just enough to observe. Maximus never growled, never barked. He simply looked, and somehow they listened. By mid-May, a reporter from the regional press had shown up to do a follow-up piece. The title would later read, From Police to Protector, the Dog Who Keeps Choosing Love. But none of that mattered to Ellie. What mattered was this. Every morning now, she brushed Maximus's coat herself. She adjusted his new navy blue vest, a soft one, not tactical, with Guardian in Training Leader embroidered on the back. Beneath it, in smaller stitching, her name, Handler, Ellie Tran. In the stillness of the clinic's side yard, with wildflowers blooming stubbornly between concrete cracks, Ellie sometimes paused to watch Maximus watch the others. There was a steadiness to him, a gravity, the kind that didn't come from teaching commands. It came from surviving the collapse, from choosing to stand guard again anyway. And just before bed that night,
As she curled beside him on the floor with Clover purring on her lap, Ellie whispered,
You're not.
her pen against the adoption chart. Her badge read Foster and Family Outreach, State Division. She spoke gently, the kind of voice people use when they think they're helping. We believe it's best to rehome them separately. Statistically, litter mates are adopted faster when they're not paired, especially with mixed species influence. Dr. Tran looked up from the exam table. Mixed species. She nodded toward the glass partition where Maximus lay curled around the 3 kittens, their small bodies rising and falling with his breath. You have to admit, it's an unusual dynamic, but people are drawn to clear categories: a kitten in a cat foster, a dog with dog siblings. This situation's emotionally loaded. Dr. Tran's silence was a wall. She continued, We're suggesting a short trial separation, just to ease the process. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. From the other side of the glass, Maximus lifted his head slowly, ears twitching toward the tension, and he watched. By evening, the plan was already in motion. The kittens had been gently relocated to a nearby foster care volunteer's home, just for the weekend, they said. Ellie wasn't told until after school. She ran into the clinic, dropping her backpack, calling out names. Clover, Ash, Whisker. No answering mew. She found Maximus in the recovery room, alone. His body lay heavy, unmoving. Not like sleep, like silence, the kind that hangs after something has been taken. His eyes flicked up at her, and for the first time since she met him, they held something close to defeat. The untouched bowl of food beside him said the rest. By nightfall, Maximus still hadn't eaten. Not a lick. He'd sniffed the entrance of the room where the kittens once were, then laid down by the door. Hours passed. Nothing changed. Ellie lay beside him on the linoleum floor, head resting on his shoulder. The clinic lights dimmed into evening mode, and outside, rain began to fall. Soft, steady, like a lullaby meant for someone else. Why do people think love has rules? She whispered. Why do they think families have to look a certain way? Maximus didn't answer, but his body curled subtly toward her, as if her breath warmed the space the kittens had left behind. The next morning she didn't wait. She pulled on her rain boots, shoved a handful of note cards into her backpack, and marched with determined steps beside her father into the town building on Ashcroft Lane. A special session of the community board was in progress. The agenda had words like foster rotation policy and species-appropriate pairing. Ellie raised her hand. Is a hero. She looked down at her note cards, then back up. But none of you were there that day. You didn't see how he covered them with his body, how he didn't move for maybe days to keep them alive. You didn't hear the sound he made when I touched his paw for the first time. It was like he was asking if I'd take care of them for him. The room was still. She cleared her throat. Her fingers gripped the card edges. They're not just animals, he found. They're his family now. He chose them. He protected them. He stayed alive for them. And if you split them up, it's not just adoption. It's breaking a promise he already made. One councilwoman leaned forward slightly, her lips parted. Ellie raised her chin. I know people think family means blood or paperwork, but sometimes it means who stays, who lies down in the cold for you, who keeps you warm with nothing but their heartbeat. Her voice cracked. Please don't take them from him. Please let them stay
as a family. No one clapped. No one needed to. The silence after Ellie's speech wasn't awkward. It was reverent, the kind that follows a truth too simple and too sacred to argue with. That night, the kittens were returned. Ellie waited by the clinic door, Maximus beside her. He didn't whine, didn't bark. He just stood tall, a silent statue against the wind, until the foster worker opened the carrier and Ash poked his head out with a sleepy meow. The moment the 3 kittens emerged, Maximus lay down without hesitation. They crawled over him, one by one, and he licked each of them slowly, as if counting, as if forgiving. Then he looked at Ellie, and for the second time since they met, he wagged his tail. Just once. That night, he ate again, every last bite. The papers were signed in quiet, not in some grand courtroom or behind City Hall glass, but right there in the clinic's break room, between stacks of patient files and half-sipped mugs of tea. The adoption forms bore all the usual checkboxes: species, age, medical status, but someone had scrawled a small addition at the top in pen. Unit name, Maximus and Co. Dr. Tran chuckled softly when he saw it. He didn't ask who wrote it. He just signed, and when he passed the pen to Ellie, she held it like it was something sacred. She didn't just write her name. She dotted the I in her name with a tiny paw print. The board's approval had come quickly, unanimous in fact. After Ellie's speech, no one could look at the policy binder the same way again. What had once been rules etched in procedure now felt brittle, like they'd been written without. October afternoon that smelled of turning leaves and wood smoke, the air gold-tinted and cool enough for sweaters, but warm enough to breathe deep without bracing. Ellie stood at the center of Maplewood Park, the leash in her hand, loose and easy. Maximus walked beside her, not pulling, not lagging, just present. His steps were slower now, measured with the wear of years and memory, but they carried a quiet pride. Nestled in a small wagon, Ellie had decorated with hand-cut hearts and construction paper stars. Ash, Clover, and Whisker peered out beneath a blanket of flannel. A pink ribbon was tied loosely around the wagon's handle, and every so often, Whisker would paw at it curiously before curling back into Maximus's scent, still lingering in the fabric. Local townspeople gathered under the same oak tree where it all began. Someone from the newspaper held a camera. Someone else held their breath. Mayor Whitmore approached with a small plaque in her hands. It wasn't a medal, though many had argued Maximus deserved one. It wasn't a certificate either. It was a wooden carving, hand-burnished, shaped like a shield. On it, etched with care, were 5 simple words. Where he stood, they lived. No rank, no badge, just the truth. Mayor Whitmore knelt beside Maximus, her blazer brushing the fallen leaves. Some heroes find their way home through headlines, she said quietly. Others, they build their home from the ones they save. She placed the shield gently at his feet. Maximus didn't move, but his eyes followed her hand, and when she stood, he shifted slightly, one paw nudging the plaque forward, as if accepting, as if understanding. The small crowd clapped, not loud, but long, and Ellie, whose eyes had shimmered with tears from the moment they arrived, let herself exhale. Her mother pulled her close. Her father bent down beside Maximus and whispered something no one else heard. And then, without ceremony or command, Maximus did something no one expected. He wagged his tail, just once. Just enough to rustle the fallen leaves behind him. just enough to break the hearts of every single person watching. Later, when the crowd had thinned and the cameras had stopped flashing, Ellie sat cross-legged beneath the oak tree, stroking Maximus's ears while the kittens tumbled sleepily in her lap. "You know," she whispered, "I think this tree remembers." Maximus turned his head slowly, nuzzling the back of her hand with his nose. "This is where you first let me see you," she said, "where you let me in." A breeze rustled through the branches above them, scattering gold and red across their shoulders. "And now," Ellie smiled, "off-center, but unmistakable." Maximus curled around 3 tiny kittens, one eye open, one ear bent forward. On the back she'd written in pencil, "Family starts where you're found." As they walked home, wagon wheels creaking, paws tapping gently on sidewalk, no one said much, but no one needed to. Because on that October afternoon, under a tree older than any of them, something lost had been given back. Not just a home, but a name. And from that day on, Maximus wasn't just retired K9. He was father. He was guardian. He was ours. It began with silence. The kind that settles before a storm, the kind that presses against windows, makes birds vanish, and leaves hang still midair, as if even nature held its breath. Ellie stood at the clinic's front desk, one hand on the phone, the other gripping Maximus's leash tighter than she meant to. "Yes, ma'am. Bring her in. We'll stay open as long as we can. Just be careful." Plick. Another line lit up. Behind her, the storm sirens wailed, long, low, rising like ghosts from the earth. The sky outside was that sickly green farmers whispered about. Not just rain, reckoning. Maximus already knew. He'd been pacing since afternoon, tail stiff, eyes locked on the window. The kittens had bundled into one trembling heap under Ellie's raincoat. Clover mewed the loudest. Maximus nudged his nose gently over them like a living blanket. By nightfall, the clinic was more than a clinic. It was sanctuary. A man arrived cradling soaked towels and something whimpering inside. A woman burst through the back, mascara running, holding a limp rabbit. A family brought an old husky they'd found tied to a porch with a note. Sorry. The storm hadn't arrived, but its shadow had scattered lives like leaves. Ellie and her father triaged fear more than injuries. No time for talking. Maximus stayed by the door, not guarding it, deciding. Every time it opened, he stepped forward. One deep breath, then chose, safe or not. One boy, maybe 6, clung to his shivering lab and wouldn't speak, until Maximus sat beside him. Then in a whisper, "We didn't leave him. We brought him." Maximus laid his head in the boy's lap. At 8:12 p.m., the power died. No warning, just blackness. Then red emergency lights kicked in. Maximus stood immediately. Ears down, but steady. He placed his body squarely between the kittens and the dark. Ellie knelt beside him. "You don't have to protect everyone," she whispered. Maximus looked at her, amber eyes glowing in the red light. He didn't believe her. Her mother passed out peanut butter crackers with steadying hands. Outside, the wind screamed. Inside, rhythm, movement, purpose. And in the center, quiet as the eye of the storm, was Maximus. Later that night, when the winds roared loud enough to rattle the roof, Ellie curled on the floor, arms around the kittens, back pressed to Maximus's side. He didn't sleep, not fully. Every howl of wind, every shifting shadow, his eyes flicked open. But he didn't move. Not until morning. When the first light cut through the clouds and struck the clinic windows, it landed on Maximus. He blinked, exhaled, then, for the first time since the sirens began, closed his eyes. Just for a moment. Just enough to say, "We made it." But it wasn't over. Maximus heard it first, long before phones buzzed or Ellie's father stirred. A cry, muffled, wet. His ears turned toward the west wall. He rose, slow but sure, and pressed his nose to the door. Ellie noticed. "Dad," she said, already reaching for her jacket. Maximus slipped outside, paws hitting rain-slick pavement, no hesitation. They followed him into the broken neighborhood. Planters overturned. Trash cans floated down the street. The storm's breath still clung to everything. He led them to a one-story house, paint flaking beneath ivy. The porch was half gone. But Maximus didn't look up. He looked down. Into the basement window. Water pressed behind cracked glass, floating debris, and movement. A paw, tiny, white, scratching. A whimper rose, muffled, desperate. Maximus growled, urgent. "There's more than one," Ellie said, kneeling. "I see 5, maybe more." "The fire department won't make it in time," Dr. Tran said. They broke the window. Water surged out, nearly spilling over the sill. The level had been inches from the ceiling. Ellie taped a flashlight to a broomstick and angled it downward. "Maximus," she whispered, "you sure?" He stepped forward, not even a glance back. The basement swallowed him. Minutes passed. Then one bark. Then another. Then silence. Then a splash. A shape. Maximus re-emerged, dragging a soaked, shivering puppy in his mouth. Ellie reached for it as Maximus dove again, and again. 6 times in 20 minutes. Ribs showing, shoulder bleeding, one leg half lame, but he never stopped. 5 puppies total. The last one limp. Ellie checked for a pulse. Weak, barely there. Whispered, "You just started choosing who you serve." He didn't move. He didn't need to, because under her hand, his tail thumped once. Enough. The clinic had never been quieter. The chaos faded. The rescue calls slowed. A sacred stillness settled. Maximus lay on a thick blanket in the recovery room. A heater hummed. Bandages covered the gash on his chest. His flank was still damp, one leg wrapped tightly. He hadn't made a sound about any of it, not when he pulled that last pup, not when glass tore his shoulder, not when thunder cracked the sky. He just moved forward, again and again. Now, finally, he rested. But even then, his eyes remained open, watching, always watching. Ellie sat cross-legged just a few feet away, her hoodie stained with mud and the dried remnants of puppy milk formula. Her hair clung to her cheeks in damp curls. There was a softness in her expression, worn, yes, but gentler than fatigue alone could explain. She had not left his side since they'd returned. Each time someone entered the room, Maximus's ears would flick, his body shifting ever so slightly, still guarding, still present, still waiting. Until it was only Ellie again, and he exhaled. "Hey," she whispered, her voice almost lost in the low hum of the heating unit. "I know you're not asleep." Maximus didn't lift his head, but his tail made the smallest motion, a gentle tap against the blanket. She scooted closer until her knees brushed the side of his chest. He turned slowly and pressed his muzzle against her thigh, as if he'd been holding back all day, and now, finally, it was okay to rest. Ellie lifted his head carefully and let it rest in her lap. He sighed, a full-body, soul-deep sigh. Not from pain, but from release, from safety. "You don't have to do it all anymore," she said quietly, stroking the fur between his ears. "You've already done more than anyone could ever ask." Her hand moved with reverence, like she was smoothing stories written in the fur, ghosts of missions, of rubble, of cities and faces he still saw in dreams. "You saved them," she whispered. "All 5 of them. Just like you saved the kittens. Just like you saved me." Her voice broke, and she didn't bother hiding it. Outside, the rain had stopped. The storm had passed hours. Didn't flinch. But his body softened in the smallest of ways. His breathing slowed. His shoulders, usually tight with silent duty, finally let go. And for the first time since he had arrived at the clinic, he slept deeply. Ellie stayed there for a long while, not caring that the bench was too hard, or that her phone had buzzed itself into silence in her coat pocket. The world could wait. Maximus had waited long enough. She brushed a hand across his side and felt the slow rhythm of his chest rise and fall. Steady, safe. He had found kittens in the cold. He had saved puppies from the flood. But tonight, Ellie knew, he had done something far greater. He had allowed himself to be held. Later, when her father peeked in through the slightly cracked door, he didn't say anything. He just stood there a moment, watching his daughter, curled like a sentinel beside the sleeping shepherd. Then quietly, he shut the door again and let them rest. Some bonds are spoken through words, others through shared storms, through quiet nights, through the weight of a head in your lap, and the trust it takes to close your eyes. Maximus had lived 100 lives through service, through war zones, through patrol cars and burning buildings. But maybe, just maybe, this was the first place he ever truly belonged. The morning sunlight warmed the old park, the same place it all began. Dew glistened on the grass like medals of its own. Under the familiar oak, now ringed with benches and mulch, a small stage had been set. The crowd gathered early, veterans in dress blues, children with painted signs, elderly couples with paper programs that read, "State Award for Animal Heroism, honoring Maximus." News crews stood quietly. Even the mayor returned, wiping fog from his glasses. But in the center of it all, calm, composed, sat Maximus. He wore no ribbon, no vest, just his brushed coat and steady gaze. The crowd parted for him as he walked, Ellie by his side, one hand on his collar, the other steadying her breath. At 10 a.m. sharp, the speakers crackled. A state official stepped forward. "Today, we honor not just courage, but a soul who, without command, chose to protect the vulnerable." Images appeared behind him. Maximus curled around newborn kittens, standing guard at the clinic, dragging a puppy from storm wreckage. A boy in the front whispered, "That's the hero dog." His mother wiped a tear. Then the governor stepped forward. He held a velvet box. Inside, a medal engraved with Maximus's name and the words, "For unyielding courage and compassion in service." He didn't pin it on. He didn't need to. He knelt and just stayed. Even when he was hurting, he showed up. A hush swept the crowd. "There are heroes in badges," she said, "and then there are heroes who carry their scars in silence." She touched the back of his neck, where fur never regrew after the warehouse collapse. "This medal doesn't make him a hero," she said. "He already was one. We're just finally seeing it." Applause rose, not loud, but deep, the kind born from reverence. Afterward, people came in waves, kneeling, thanking, taking photos. Maximus stayed calm, polite, but he leaned into only one person that day, Ellie. Under the oak, she whispered, "You did good, Max." As sunlight filtered through the branches, someone placed a sign beside the tree. "This is where Maximus chose to save lives. May we all choose as bravely." And beneath, in brass, "In memory of Officer Hannah Ridge and the courage she passed on." Ellie ran her fingers over the name. Maximus stared into the wind beside her, like he felt it, like he knew. That night, Ellie printed a photo, Maximus lying beneath the oak, one paw curled around Clover. She slid it into a scrapbook. The first page read, "This is where we met, under a tree, in the quiet, where the world passed by, and Maximus stayed." She added photos and notes. Day 3, Maximus barked at the broom. I think he was just protecting the kittens from dust. Night 12, I had a nightmare. Woke up with all 3 kittens in my hoodie and Maximus at my bed. I never told anyone the dream, but they knew. Week 5, Dr. Tran says Maximus could retire, but he still checks the doors every night. Each page was stitched with memory, not as a chronicle, but as quiet testimony. A story written not with dates, but with loyalty. One afternoon in the clinic's sunroom, Ellie sat surrounded by photo corners. Maximus lay nearby, twitching an ear every time she reached for tape. She smiled. Some people write memoirs, but I think this is more honest. Maximus grunted softly, approving. I call it Maximus's journal, she said. Even if I'm the one writing it, it's yours. On a new page, she glued a photo from the storm rescue. Maximus, soaked and muddy, carrying a trembling pup. She wrote beneath it, he didn't wait for orders, he just knew. That evening, Ellie placed the scrapbook into a padded envelope. She addressed it to Mrs. Dorothy Ridge, St. Paul, Minnesota. She included a letter. Dear Mrs. Ridge, I never... Ellie Tran. The next morning, Maximus sat on the porch, the kittens curled beside him like a second heartbeat. Ellie whispered, I sent it. I hope it reaches her like you reached us. Maximus touched his muzzle to her knee. Inside the scrapbook, between the last pages, she had tucked one last photo, never published. Maximus asleep, the kittens nestled into him. Underneath, in tiny handwriting, he was made to protect, even when no one tells him to. That same morning the clinic was hushed, not from absence, but from something sacred. Maximus lay in his usual corner. The grown kittens dozed in the sun. Then a knock. A man in a grease-stained jacket stood holding a soggy cardboard box. Found him behind the lot, he murmured. Couldn't leave him, but I can't keep him.
Inside, a puppy, all trembling limbs, matted fur, and wide, unsure eyes. Ellie knelt beside him. Oh, sweetheart. The pup didn't move, just blinked. Then Maximus entered. He didn't bark, he didn't rush. He walked with the calm weight of someone who had carried fear before. He lay down near the warming pad, watched, waited, then gently he exhaled, one warm breath. The puppy shifted, a step forward, then another, drawn not by command, but by safety. He reached Maximus's chin and licked it. Ellie pressed a hand to her chest. She'd seen Maximus as a soldier, guardian, healer, but this was something deeper, a bridge. Later that day, Maximus and the pup, who Ellie had already begun calling Scout, napped together. Ellie sat on the clinic's back step, notebook in her lap. She wrote only 3 lines. The first time we met, he guarded something too small to fight. Today, he did it again. Maybe that's what healing is, passing the torch without putting it down. That evening, Ellie brought Maximus his favorite blanket and tucked it beneath him and Scout. "You're still teaching, huh?" she whispered. "Still saving, even without sirens." She brushed dust from his fur. "You didn't just come here to be rescued, Max. You came to remind us how to rescue others." Maximus sighed and nestled his head beside Scout's. Outside, the wind stirred the leaves, autumn letting go without struggle. The air smelled like dusk and pine and home. Ellie sat beside them long after dark. Some stories didn't need to be written down. They lived in the way one dog lay beside a frightened pup and said without a single word, "You're safe now. I've been where you are, and I stayed, so you could too." He was made to protect, clutching coffee and children of all kinds, some giggling, some silent, one in a Batman hoodie who said nothing at all. At the front stood Ellie, Maximus by her side. The kittens curled nearby in a soft crate. "Today's class is about listening," she said. "Not just with ears, but with eyes, hands, and hearts." Maximus blinked slowly in agreement. One boy, Daniel, 8 years old, small and silent, watched from the 3rd row. He hadn't spoken to anyone, but his eyes drifted often toward Maximus, like hope checking to see if it could breathe. That first class was simple: how to approach an animal, how to kneel, how to wait, how to ask permission without words. Maximus moved calmly as Ellie demonstrated. No leash, no commands, just trust. During the break, Maximus wandered among the children. Daniel stood apart, fidgeting with the string of his hoodie. Maximus looked at him, not approaching, not withdrawing, just waiting. Daniel took one small step forward, then another. He knelt, hesitantly. Maximus lowered his head onto the boy's knee. Silence. No one spoke. Ellie stood frozen, tape roll in hand, watching. Daniel's fingers trembled as they touched Maximus's ear. Then came a voice, soft and real. "He's warm." It was all he said. It was enough. By the 3rd Saturday, the class had grown. Someone brought juice boxes. Someone else brought name tags. The kittens became a learning station.
kids took turns bottle feeding and swaddling them in towel hugs. Maximus had a badge now. Certified helper and listener, ask me anything, I won't judge. That morning, Daniel arrived early to help set up. He whispered a hi to Ellie. And when a new girl entered crying, it was Daniel who knelt beside Maximus and said, "It's okay. He doesn't talk either, but he hears everything." Later, Ellie sat on the clinic steps, Maximus at her side, kittens chasing a leaf nearby. She whispered, "You were made for more than patrols, weren't you?" Maximus only sighed, deep and calm. Ellie looked at the class sign again. She scribbled something beneath the paw print. Come learn from someone who doesn't need words to teach love. That evening, Dr. Tran paused by the clinic reverence. "You made it," she whispered, hands trembling on his face. The boy turned the frame toward Ellie. It showed Maximus in uniform beside Officer Hannah Ridge, smiling, her hand on his back. "I'm her mother," the woman said. She called Maximus her other heartbeat. Ellie hadn't noticed her clipboard fall. She stepped forward gently. "Would you like to sit?" she asked. Maximus stayed close, watching the woman with something deeper than recognition. Over tea, they spoke of Ridge's laugh, her sunglasses, her sketch-filled journal. She said Maximus wasn't just trained. He carried responsibility no one taught him. He just had it. Ellie whispered, "He still does." The woman's voice cracked. "When they said no one survived the collapse, I still hoped. She told me once if Maximus has breath left in him, he'll keep going. And he did, didn't he?" Maximus pressed his head gently against her knee. Ellie brought out a small weathered tag, Maximus's caller ID from the night they found him. She handed it to the boy, who read aloud. "Retired, K9, Maximus, Unit 11, Minneapolis PD." "You found home again," he said. Maximus didn't move, but Ellie saw the lean in his shoulder, the longer blink. Before they left, Ridge's mother gave Ellie a letter. She wrote this a week before the accident. I think it belongs here now. Ellie unfolded it, eyes stinging as she read Ridge's careful script. "If anything ever happens to me, promise you'll look after Maximus. He was made to protect, even when no one tells him to. He's not just a partner. He's memory. He's heart with fur. If he's still breathing, it means he's still saving someone." Ellie covered her mouth. The woman touched her cheek gently. "You're that someone now." At the door, Maximus raised one paw in a slow, solemn salute. The boy did the same. Time folded, loss met return, and something stitched back together, quietly, permanently. The last snow had long melted. Spring returned softly, brushing the fields in new green. Ellie came early that day, Maximus beside her, the three cats trotting behind. They gathered beneath the old oak where it had all begun. Ash stretched in the sun. Clover leapt to a low branch. Whisker curled beside Maximus's back foot. Ellie sat in the grass. They listened, to wind, to birdsong, to peace. "It's funny," she murmured, fingers in Maximus's coat. "How life circles back." He blinked, slow and steady. "They said you were broken." She glanced down at her notebook, half full of scribbles, poems, memories. "They didn't know what healing looks like in someone who doesn't speak." A butterfly landed on Maximus's back. He didn't move. Later, a family passed. "You're safe here. We all are." That afternoon, Dr. Tran arrived with iced tea and drawings from the kids. The top one showed Maximus under the oak, stick figures all around him.
In crayon it read, "Hero Dog Forever." Maximus sniffed it, huffed, and laid back down. Dr. Tran looked to the branches. When we first found him, I wasn't sure he'd make it, but maybe that's what love does. It gives the broken room to breathe. Ellie took Maximus's paw in hers. By dusk, the light turned gold. Whisker yawned, Clover chased petals, Ash purred. Maximus closed his eyes. Ellie lay back, watching the canopy sway above. "You gave them a future," she whispered. "You gave me one." Maximus sighed, not from exhaustion, from rest. As stars blinked into view, beneath the tree that never forgot, sat the oddest family. A scarred dog who never left, 3 cats once abandoned, a girl who now understood healing, and a tree that had seen it all, together, whole. The morning air was still. Ellie sat at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, her laptop open but untouched. The cursor blinked, waiting. Maximus lay nearby, paws crossed, eyes half closed but watching, always watching. Down the hall, the kittens crashed into something they shouldn't have. Ellie didn't move to stop them, not today. Today, she was writing about him, not for publication, just a thank you in lowercase. He never said a word, but he taught me everything. By noon, it had a title, "The Dog Who Taught Me Everything." She added a photo, Maximus under the oak, kittens sprawled around him like punctuation marks. His gaze was steady, distant, like he knew someone might need to see this one day. She sent the piece to the Willow Bend Times with a quiet subject line, "For consideration." Then she closed the laptop, took Maximus for a walk. 2 days later, the story was everywhere. Someone on the digital team posted it online, then someone else shared it, then a few hundred more. By Thursday afternoon, Ellie's inbox overflowed. "This brought me to tears. He reminds me of my father's canine partner. Thank you. How do I help dogs like Maximus?" A National Rescue Foundation reached out to repost it. A retired Marine scanned a handwritten note. "Thank you for giving voice to those who gave everything and ask for nothing." Ellie read in silence. Maximus looked up from his corner like he already knew. She knelt beside him. "You're not just mine anymore," she whispered. "You're everyone's now." The next morning, a local news segment ran, then a national one, then everywhere. Maximus's face appeared across social media. Hashtag Maximus the Protector. Hashtag Silent Guardian. Hashtag Retire Animals. It pledged to support dogs like him, veterans with nowhere else to go. Dr. Tran served as advisory vet. Ellie, now the founding youth ambassador. Maximus was the face. His portrait, mid-blink, noble, adorned the sight. Not heroic, just peaceful. Donations came in, not millions, but enough. Enough to help the next Maximus survive the storm. At home, not much changed. Evenings still ended with quiet walks. The kittens still knocked over cereal boxes. And every Sunday, Ellie wrote. Updates, small reflections, never calling herself a writer. Just someone who had learned how to listen. One night, she read aloud a message from a teenage girl in Tennessee. My dad passed. His canine, Jasper, hadn't eaten in days. I sat beside him like you did. Today, he ate again. Ellie folded the message and tucked it into Maximus's scrapbook. You're still saving lives, she whispered. His ears twitched. That was enough. August softened around the edges. Autumn peeked in. Ellie laced her shoes slowly. Maximus waited at the door,
older now, his once deep coat dusted with silver, hips stiffer, but posture steady. She opened the door. He stepped out with quiet certainty. Their final walk wasn't called that. It was just today's walk. Willow Bend paused for him. Neighbors waved softly. Children slowed their bikes. "Morning, Maximus," someone called from the bakery. At the florist's window, he lingered, still loving the scent of sourdough. One child reached out, touched his shoulder. "Thank you," the boy whispered. Maximus didn't wag, but he met the boy's eyes, held it, then walked on. At the park, he stopped. The oak stood tall at the field's edge, the same one where he was once found, burned, exhausted, guarding what wasn't his. Maximus walked toward it, slow but steady. The bench was weathered now, familiar. He sat first, then Ellie. She leaned into him, her hand brushing the fur along his spine. "You know," she said, "we've walked this park since I was 12. He didn't move, but his eyes scanned the field, like he was counting the grass. Ellie pulled a napkin from her jacket. Inside, a peanut butter treat. He took it gently, rested his chin on her leg. Above, a single leaf drifted from the oak. He opened the window. Let the breeze in. "You brought this town back to life," she said. By morning, a single feather lay by the door, still warm. The oak had grown thicker with the years, its roots pressed deep, holding more than soil, holding memory. Children's voices echoed through the park. They paused before the statue, bronze, gentle. A German shepherd lay watchful, chin on paws. 3 kittens nestled close. The plaque read, "Maximus and family." He protected them before they had names. A boy, maybe 8, tilted his head. "Is the story real?" A woman knelt beside him. Ellie, now in her 30s, a Tran Animal Center badge at her chest. Lines marked her face, the kind made by joy and time. She looked at the statue the way you look at someone who changed you. "Yes," she said, "every bit of it." Behind them stood the expanded center, therapy wings, memorial gardens, rescue wards, and a play yard filled with barking joy. Maximus's legacy wasn't just in stone. It lived in second chances, in children learning gentleness, in veterans sitting beneath the oak, whispering names to the wind. Inside the center, Ellie showed the group the Companions Through Courage wing. Photos lined the walls. Maximus and kittens, Maximus with patience, Maximus nose to nose with a nervous horse. His vest hung behind glass. K9, retired. Next to it, his original collar. Worn, scuffed, sacred. Later, Ellie returned alone to the oak. She knelt before the statue, not out of ritual, but grounding. 10 years, she whispered. And it still feels like yesterday. A breeze stirred the air. She unfolded a letter, yellowed, soft, from Ridge's mother. He was made to protect, even when no one tells him to. That kind of love never dies. It just changes shape. Ellie looked up. "You're still here," she said. "In every small act of courage, in every paw step, in the kids who ask why animals trust us, and in the ones who learn how to earn that trust." A rustle behind her. She turned. Ash. Now old, regal, gray, threaded through his fur. He padded forward, curled at the statue's bronze leg. like he always had. No cue, no coaxing, just instinct. Ellie smiled, tears soft but steady. Some stories don't need retelling. They live on, quietly, completely, in bronze, in breath, in the hush between seasons. She looked once more and whispered, "You're still watching, aren't you?" And if one listened close, closer than most ever do, they might have sworn the leaves replied. Sometimes, the quietest moments between a dog and their person are, and when we open our hearts in return, we find something rare. A connection that grounds us, heals us, and makes us better humans. If you've felt even a piece of that in your own life, or hope to, there's a beautiful little resource I came across that helps deepen that relationship with your dog. It's not a program or pitch, just something that might offer a few gentle insights and ideas. If your heart says yes, give it a look. And thank you not just for watching, but for loving dogs the way you do. The world is quieter, but better, because of people like you.